This is a night of unexpected last-minute changes. See, I thought I'd be returning to Fort Niagara pretty soon. As it turns out, I can't. And as I said last time, I thought we'd be leaving the craft worlds behind for an episode or two, but as it turns out, we're not. And the reason for that is because something special came in the mail the other day, and it's right here.
This is a first edition Dark Reaper for the Eldar in Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader. That's the first edition of the entire game that Vyaster was talking about last episode.
I know that history, that, Rogue Trader edition, that first version of Eldar from 40k sounds pretty historically relevant, right? But it's not the game history that makes this significant to me. It's the personal history it has. You see, this was the first miniature from Warhammer, either universe, that I ever laid eyes on in my life.
The year was 1994, and I had gone with my grandmother to Niagara Hobby and Craft Mart. It was a hobby store in the local area, and originally, I went to go see the train sets. That was my hobby at the time. But while I was there, I couldn't help but notice these brightly colored models staring at me from the shelf. Now, when my grandmother read to me the name Dark Reapers, I was enthralled. I wanted them, but she said, very clearly, no. Why would you want them? You're just a little kid. You'd have to build and paint these yourself. And though I didn't want to admit it, I was a little kid. And, well, she was right.
I know it may sound silly now knowing me, but at one time, I only thought that these little pewter miniatures were meant to be one piece and just stay as they were. I didn't really think about having to build them or color them myself. That was a little far out of my comprehension at age 4.
Some years passed, I didn't really think about it, and Niagara Hobby closed its doors. And even the memory of the Dark Reapers for a while, those awesome miniatures that captured my imagination, faded from memory.
But I think it's time now that I did this miniature justice for the sake of its game history and the sake of its personal history to me. And it's been about 26 years, so I'd say this is a long time coming, wouldn't you? Awesome. Let's begin.
So to start off with, I know some people will just want to start dry brushing right up from the black undercoat, but I don't really feel like doing that. After all, the lore says the Dark Reapers have armor the color of midnight. Since when has midnight ever been pitch black? Thanks to Mickey, by the way, because me being a little bit colorblind, I couldn't tell what exactly looked like midnight. So we decided on this dark purple. So that's our root color. I'll just base coat this down and dry brush up with various shades of lighter purple. Not anything big, just enough to get the details to pop out so I know what I'm doing later. So after I've done that, we'll dry brush even further up with a lighter shade of purple. This is just going to be a mix of that mid-range purple and some gray. I'll just add a little shine to it, that's all. And after this, maybe I'll go in with an even lighter shade of purple and do some really, really, really dry brushing. That'll get that natural kind of sunrise light on it, I think. Yeah, right there. Now, I don't want to get too carried away with the dry brushing, because this will only get me so far on an Eldar model. The detail work has yet to begin, and let me tell you, most of this is going to be covered up by the time I'm done with it. This is just to give me a nice little beginning point for all of the details that are to follow, and you'll see what I mean later. Oh boy, will you ever see what I mean later. So we're going to start by making these little psychic radar fins on the edge of his helmet red. I don't know why that stuck with me as my memory from a little kid, but I remember them being pretty brightly red or orange, so I'm going to do that as an homage. Plus, I think it'll really frame the skeleton face when that's done too. Now, much like the rest of it, this is only the base layer. I'll clean up more of this later. But for right now, we're going to go into the detail work. I'm starting by line highlighting the faceplate around the helmet. This is just to ensure that there is a separation between that skeleton face and the midnight purple helmet. It's kind of precise. It's almost imperceptible because I'm using a watered down highlight. But nevertheless, you can easily see just from this angle how much of a difference that's already making. Yeah, once I do that skeleton face, the borders couldn't be more clearly defined.
I'm not gonna make a big stink about line highlighting on this model like I did with orcs, because Eldar have always been a model line that relies heavily upon line highlighting to get the look down. So it's just part of the look, it's just part of the technique. I'm not gonna knock it. Not like it would do me any good at this point.
So now I'm just going to continue with that line highlighting. I'm going all around every edge of the armor plates that I see with that lighter purple, giving it just a little extra definition. Mind you, this lighter purple is also watered down, so it's not going to leave as much of a stark line. It's more like a slow gradient up to the edge. At least that's what it will be if I'm doing it right. If I mess up any of these lines, I will go back with this very same fine brush and kind of cover them up later. Right now I just want to make sure I pick out all the edges. As you see here, every raised edge gets this treatment. Now I'm going in and picking out even more details, mostly like the metal of the hydraulics behind his arm. That's just going to be what's supporting his gun. And it doesn't look the same as every other Wraithbone piece of armor, so we'll make that a little shinier. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take care of these little ribbons around his thigh and his shoulder. Now, while the fins are red, the gun is going to be red, the gems are red, I want a little more color in here. So we're going to make these ribbons in all blue, a dark blue. A flat blue, not the shiny blue like I did on some of the other Eldar models that I have. This is supposed to kind of blend in with the midnight. The gems are going to be the focus of this part, so I want this to be cool looking, but as unobtrusive as possible. The very next thing that we're going to do is cover the brown areas, the leather of the pouches, the leather of the holster. We're going to start off with that dark brown, the flat brown, that kind of gives the appearance of dyed leather. But immediately following that, we're going to dry brush it with a dust color. This gives the leather the appearance of being scuffed. Eldar may be pristine, but nobody is immune from the stresses of the battlefield, and that should show on their gear no matter what. This is also going to be one of the last chances I have for dry brushing on this part of the miniature before going back in and doing some of the line highlights around the flap edges. I'm going to relish this moment as much as I can, because post this moment, I'm not going to be seeing this dry brush anytime soon again on the body of this miniature. Which leads me immediately to the next part, edge highlighting the psychic radar fins. The corners make this pretty easy to do if I'm being honest, especially if I water my paints down. But the trouble with this is my brand of red paints tend to, well, dry out really, really quickly. It's almost impossible for me to leave a good mark consistently. And even though I am using water and thinning my paints, I find myself constantly having to reapply the paint in order to get a good edge going. And while that may be easily solved on the psychic radar fins, the gems take a bit more work and patience. I need to almost get the paint on the brush and apply it flawlessly directly to the gem on the miniature in order to get this to turn out the way I want it to. Otherwise, I'm stuck rinsing off the brush, wasting paint, and repeating everything while, as you can see, fraying the brush in the process, thus losing me the ability to be more precise. So in other words, I have to be perfect the first time. Anything else, and the model might end up taking some hits in terms of quality. I'm going to then break up the monotony on that front armor by adding some gray stripes to that loin plate. Yeah, I know I should be doing a bit more neon colors, but you know me, I like the darkness. I like keeping it in that cool color scheme down there. So that's what I'm gonna do. Oh man, now it's time for something even worse. It's the eye highlighting. Now this stuff, you know how I feel about eye highlighting. I hate it, and it's made worse by the fact that the paint keeps drying on my brush, so I can't even get the good highlight in there. I have to keep going back in and in again. I think this one was something like my 6th attempt. Oh well. Now what we're doing is just base coating the handles of the gun. Yeah, we're not even onto the main part of the gun itself, just the parts that he's holding. I'll base this red, give it a couple line highlights of watered down bright red, and that should do the trick, really. Nothing fancy here, just doing what needs to be done. Alright, are you ready? Because things are about to get even more detailed. Like most designs, I don't like using decals, so I'm going to freehand this design on here. That wide open conical hat is supposed to harbor the rune of the Dark Reapers, which I'm drawing now. Thankfully, it's just a bunch of straight lines and that one little crescent curve at the top, so this is fairly easy for me to do with a fine brush and thin paints. And with this, as you can see, it looks pretty great.
And when I was showing Vyasar the model and telling him what I planned to do, one of the first things he said back to me was, "Don't fuck up the gun." Now, I don't know, it seems like an ordinary Reaper launcher to me. I don't know what I could fuck up, but let's have a look, huh?
Alright, so it starts simply enough, base coating the entire thing in Mephiston red, kind of that muted dark red. Yeah, I know, that's not what the original launchers looked like in this model line, but once more, I'm the guy in charge, and I like things to be color schemed more like they are in 3rd edition. And I really like the prospect of a red Eldar missile launcher like this. So, just gonna lay it on real thick there and dry brush some very, very bright red over it. I can't see it, but I really need to focus on this. This is such a small part of the model that it just needs to be, well, really carefully dry brushed. If you lay it on too thick, you could lose some details. And of course, if you line highlight like I just did, that'll really bring out the details. Add to it some ink in the recesses, purple ink in my case. You've got yourself something perfectly acceptable right here. But am I satisfied? I should say not. I've seen flame designs painted on these things in the past, and I like that idea. So I'm going to just make a dark area here in midnight purple, and then go over that dark area in white to pick out some flame designs on this thing. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, maybe I'll have to start over. Who knows, but that's the point of experimenting here, isn't it? So once I'm done with this midnight purple base coat here, I'm just going to take the exact same brush and do some white highlights. Yeah, how's that, V? I didn't fuck up your gun, did I? So we go from having a model that looks like this to a model that looks like this. Almost exactly something that would catch my eye as a 4-year-old. I think I've done my memory proud.
I found in painting this that everything just kind of came naturally to me. The line highlighting, the dry brushing, the gem effects, it all just happened so naturally with a minimal amount of cleanup necessary. Is it fate that I managed to do this so well, or well enough anyway? I don't know. That would certainly fit the Eldar theme, wouldn't it? But for right now, I think it is truly time we left the craft worlds behind. I have some other historical miniatures that I'm going to paint soon, even older than this one. So, I look forward to seeing you guys next time when we address some alternate models to Games Workshop for the Warhammer Fantasy line. I'll see you all then.